Hello everyone, welcome to the lecture 31 of week 7. This is Dripta and the title of today's lecture is Introducing Pragmatics. So, we have discussed a few issues related to semantics and now we know what does semantics mean. So, we will start today's class while talking about the differences between semantics and pragmatics. Then we will talk about the role of context, we will talk about deixis, reference and inference. So, you can easily understand that we are talking about certain concepts which are already known to you. So, we will be referring to certain concepts which are known to you and use them for the purpose of discussing pragmatics. Then I will introduce you to this idea of speech acts. I am sure some of you already know about them. We will be just discussing the basic idea of speech acts and certain types of speech acts as well. Finally, we will be addressing the issues related to politeness phenomena in pragmatics. So, if you ask the question what do we study in pragmatics, you can simply say that pragmatics is the study of invisible meaning. What does invisible meaning mean? So, when you see this advertisement baby cell and you understand certain things from this advertisement, right? It of course does not mean that babies are for sale, but it is something else, but you are getting something from the advertisement. So, the advertisement basically talks about a sale for baby products. But sale for babies, this component is not written. So, how do you understand it? So, we understand certain components of meaning which is not overtly said. So, this is something that we are referring to as invisible meaning, and in pragmatics we do talk about these invisible meanings. So, when we interpret meaning which is not based on words only, but more than that, it falls under the domain of pragmatics. We basically try to understand what the speaker intends to say. This is the invisible meaning. And as you can easily understand, the idea of pragmatics is related to meaning again, but we are talking about certain concepts which are related to social factors. So, we can say that pragmatics is related to semantics and also related to something called sociolinguistics that we have not explored yet, but we will explore in detail in future. At this point, let us also quickly talk about the difference between semantics and pragmatics. You can say that both the components, both the domains of semantics and pragmatics deal with meaning. So, how these are different? So, we can say that semantics studies meaning of linguistic expressions, and you can understand what do I mean by linguistic expressions. You have understood that different components of a structure can have different meanings and the entire structure can have different meanings, that we have already discussed previously. So, semantics studies meanings of different linguistic expressions, and we can say at this point that there is a cognitive system called the semantic system, which plays a central role for the account of meaning of linguistic expressions. So, we can say pragmatics is the study of other things that can include meaning apart from the semantic system. So, even in lexical semantics we have seen that there are certain meanings which are related to each other in a network kind of thing, and we did talk about structure and meaning in terms of syntax semantics relationship, but now we are introducing some ideas which are slightly different. We are saying that we are talking about meanings which is not a part of semantic system. When you think about the example of baby cell, you can say that there is something which is extremely important for our purpose, which is basically the role of context. So, whenever we talk about this invisible meaning and meaning which is not a part of the core semantic system, you can say that there is certain role of context. And while talking about pragmatics, we will go back to certain ideas that we have discussed previously, and of course certain ideas which are new for you. So, here we are talking to the idea of homonyms again that we discussed in the class of lexical semantics. I am sure you remember what homonyms are. So, here is a very simple example for you. If you use the word bank, it has two different meanings. So, this is actually you can say this is something called lexical ambiguity. You already learnt about structural ambiguity, and we also discussed about different structures and how meanings are different for them. Here we are talking about lexical ambiguities for the role of context. But if you happen to listen to this sentence, I am going to the bank to withdraw some cash, you understand that we are talking about a particular kind of bank where you keep cash. We are not talking about something called a river bank. So, you are eliminating the ambiguity in terms of the context. So, the context is telling us that we are not talking about river bank here, but we are talking about an organization where we are keeping money. So, when we talk about the importance of context, let us go back to the idea of deixis. If you remember the long list of functional categories that we discussed while talking about syntax, we did talk about deixis. We also talked about deixis in the discussion of certain semantic issues. Again, we are coming back to deixis for the purpose of discussing some ideas in pragmatics. So, you can see the examples on the slide there, this, now, then, today, tomorrow. So, what do you think about these examples? What are these words doing? They have certain roles to play, right? So, or in other words, do you think that these words are related to some kind of context? Do we understand their meaning based on the context? Of course, yes, because if you do not use a contextual meaning, you will not be able to understand or decipher the meaning of these terms, right. So, we can say that deixis, the term, is very much related to the idea of context. Here are some more examples, rather there are different types of deixis that we can see on the slide. We can say that there are person deixis like him, them, spatial deixis like here, there, that, and temporal deixis like now and then. So, I am asking you to think about similar examples in your own language rather than focusing on English only. Please make a list of the deictic expressions or deixis in your language and try to see if you have different expressions for person deixis, spatial deixis and temporal deixis, and try to understand whether there is a role of context while we talk about the deixis. We are also talking about an idea which we discussed earlier, the idea of reference, and we are talking about the idea of inference as well. So, I am sure you remembered that we talked about the difference between sense and reference in semantics. Remember the example of morning star and evening star. This is a quick clue to help you to recall the differences that we discussed. So, we can say that reference is an act by which a speaker or writer uses language to enable a listener or reader to identify something. So, you are basically helping the hearer, if you are the speaker, to identify something. So, this is something which is reference, but here we are describing it as an act, right. So, what are the examples? We have already discussed some example of references previously while discussing semantics. You can say that certain proper nouns like Pacific Ocean, Delhi, Shakira, these are all proper nouns. You can say certain other nouns in phrases, for example, a poet, my friend, the cat, or pronouns like he, she, it. All these are examples of references. So, now let us see a context based example which will be helpful for us. So, in a restaurant, if one waiter can ask another waiter something like this, where is the spinach salad sitting, and the other person is answering sitting by the door, it does not mean that the spinach salad is sitting like a person on a chair by the door, it means something else. So, they intend to say something else where certain kind of invisible meanings are involved. The process which is involved in this case is called inference, which is different from reference. So, what does we mean when we say there is something called inference? We can say that an inference is additional information used by the listener to create a connection between what is said and what must be meant. So, this is again some kind of invisible meaning. So, this is the additional information that we are referring to while we are talking about the example. So, here I am asking to think about the difference between reference and inference. So, if you can figure out that there are certain differences, it will be great if you can note them for yourself. So, while discussing the issues in pragmatics, we are always talking about the role of context, right. So, whatever invisible meaning we are discussing with the help of Deixis, reference, inference, etc., remember we are always talking about this invisible meaning only. So, we will be talking about context and this idea of anaphora. I am sure it rings a bell because we did talk about anaphora previously. You also did a small exercise involving anaphora if you remember. So, while doing syntax we did talk about anaphora, and if you are an advanced learner, if you are familiar with the idea of binding theory that we did not discuss in this course, but may be familiar to you, then you have some idea of anaphora as well. So, we are talking about new referents and referring back to them. So, again we are talking about some kind of context, right. Without context we cannot say that referring back to them. Whenever we are using the term referring back to them, we are of course talking about a context. So, there are three example sentences here. I am asking you to pay attention to these sentences. Sentence A says, we saw a funny home video about a boy washing a cat in a small bath. So, I have highlighted a cat purposefully. The second sentence says, the cat started struggling and shaking and the boy got really wet. And the third sentence says, when he let go, it jumped out of the bath and ran away. So, I am asking you to think about the status of it. If you do not have sentence A and B, instead you have only sentence C, you do not understand what is happening, right. But if you have sentence A and B, you have a context. So, when we are talking about the linguistic item it, we are definitely referring to certain kind of context. So, what is this it? So, this is of course an NP, we consider pronouns as NP as well. So, what is this status of this NP? This is something that we are asking at this point. Of course, it has a relationship with the context. So, I am asking you to think about the status of it and note down for yourself. Now, we will come to this idea of something that we discussed previously, which is also, or rather which can be considered as a major part of pragmatics as well. So, we are talking about presupposition. I am sure you remembered that we talked about presupposition in semantics classes. So, we are talking about the concept again for the purpose of discussing the invisible meaning. So, let us see these examples A, B and C. A, why did you arrive late? B, you arrived late. And here A implies B, we know about the implication. And when did you stop smoking? The speaker presupposes that you used to smoke. So, when you are saying that you arrived late, it means that there is this idea already there that you arrived late. There is a typo, so it should be late. I hope you noted that. And in C, when you are saying when did you stop smoking, it means that you actually smoked, that is known to the speaker. So, the speaker presupposes that you used to smoke. So, this is the idea of presupposition that we have to keep in mind. Now, let us talk about this idea of speech acts, which is something new to us. So, in terms of the invisible meaning, we were talking about deixis, reference and anaphor and presupposition. So, all these ideas are already known to us. So, we did talk about these for some other purpose, maybe in semantics or partially in syntax, but the idea of speech act is something which is totally new to us. So, please pay attention to this. What does speech acts mean? We can recognize different types of action, right. So, these are performed by a speaker with the utterance. You know what is an utterance, you also know the difference between utterance and sentence, and you also know the difference between utterance, sentence and proposition by now. So, here we are talking about utterance and also referring to the speaker, and we are saying that speaker is the actions are performed by a speaker. Please pay attention to this concept of action and performance. So, we are saying that the action is performed by a speaker with an utterance. So, we use the term speech act to describe these. So, what kind of actions we are referring to? We are referring to actions like requesting, commanding, questioning or informing. So, these are basically certain kind of speech acts that describe actions. So, please pay attention to this chart where we have certain examples, and when we are talking about structures and functions both. So, if we say do you eat mango, you can say that structurally, or if you think in terms of the syntactic structure, it is an interrogative construction. But if you think about the function, what is a function? It's questioning, the function is question. If we think about the second one, eat the mango, we call it imperative sentence in terms of structure. So, for some of you the idea is new, so you can make a note of it. So, we are talking about the modality in terms of structure, it is an imperative sentence, and in terms of function we are saying it is either a command or a request. It can be either command or request, depend on the tone. And the third sentence, you ate the mango, syntactically it is a declarative sentence that you have understood, but the function is that it is a statement. So, do you eat mango, eat the mango and you ate the mango, these have different structures and functions. So, we associate structures and functions with certain speech acts. So, the study of speech acts is quite detailed one. We will be just talking about the major components and major parts of speech acts. So, we can say that interrogatives with a function of question are described as direct speech acts, and requests are often described as indirect speech acts. So, there are more types of speech acts, but it is important for us to know that there are something called direct and indirect speech acts, and when we talk about structures and functions, we can relate different types of speech acts with them. So, now let us talk about something which is politeness. So, you can say that politeness is a very general term why we are talking about politeness here. So, I am saying that here we are talking to politeness, or rather referring to politeness as a pragmatic term. So, you can say that it is semantics as well, or you can say that it is related to the certain societal norms. We have not started talking about the social factors in linguistics, that we will be doing, as I told you, later. But in terms of politeness, we do think about them, right? We do think about certain meaning components and certain societal norms maybe. So, politeness research is a major component of pragmatics nowadays, and also in terms of social media, people are talking about politeness phenomena, and you can say that this is an overlapping area with meaning and social the studies of language and society. So, you can say that politeness in general terms as having to do with idea like being tactful, modest and nice to other people. So, how will you define politeness? So, we are of course talking about linguistic politeness, but if you generally define politeness, you basically talk about being tactful, modest and nice to other people. So, when we are saying that we are focusing on linguistic politeness, we do use certain expressions which, so use of certain linguistic expressions make the construction more polite, and this is something which is a part of invisible meaning as well. So, when we say could you please, then something, could you please do something for me, I was wondering if I can. So, it is another way of saying certain things more politely, and you can also say examples like may I. So, you can understand that for case of English, if you think about these constructions or adding these part with a sentence, you make the construction polite which was otherwise not polite, or it was just a declaration. So, it will be really nice if you can figure out certain examples from your own language which can be useful for politeness strategies. I am using the term politeness strategies carefully because this is a strategy for making construction more polite, which is of course related to pragmatic issues or invisible meaning. So, please list certain terms which may not be words, rather a group of words which are making a construction more polite. And how will you describe the sentences that I have listed? So, will you describe them in terms of certain constructions which are making them more polite, or you will do something else? So, this is extremely useful for us in order to understand. So, I told you that we will be coming back to certain ideas which we discussed previously, like we discussed certain syntax and ideas of syntax and semantics. So, there is another idea which we are discussing again. What is this? This is Gricean maxim. So, I hope you remember the maxims that we discussed in terms of semantics. So, here we are saying that they are also associated with invisible meaning. So, if I ask you to think about it, it will be really great if you can again list some sentences if needed in English, if needed in your own language. So, let us see the different types of maxims again that we had learned previously. The first one is the maxim of relevance. It says be relevant. Second one is the maxim of quality, which says try to make your contribution one that is true and do not say things which are false or you lack adequate evidence. So, we are basically talking about certain norms which are associated with meaning, right. You can again say like politeness phenomena that it has an overlap of certain social norms and meaning component. If you are thinking in this direction, you are absolutely correct that it is not only semantics, it is something else. Then we talk about the maxim of quantity, like do not make your contribution more or less informative than required. And finally, the maxim of manner, when we are saying avoid ambiguity and obscurity, be brief and orderly. So, all these maxims, when we discussed them in terms of semantics, we did talk about the meaning component only, but when I am asking you to scan them again in terms of pragmatics, I am sure you are thinking about some examples which are related to the invisible meaning, right. So, it is important for us to see the Gricean maxims from the lens of pragmatics. So, we are coming to the conclusion part of this class, and we have learned a number of things in pragmatics, and it is very important for us to pay attention to this, because we are basically stepping into a domain which is an overlap of two different things. And this is the first lecture of this week. In this week we will also step into a major part of this course, which is sociolinguistics. So, pragmatics is actually creating a bridge between the structural component and the sociolinguistic component, and this is why we are introducing this first lecture in the group in the very first lecture of week 7, so that we can understand that there is a transition from the structural aspects of language to the social aspects of language, and pragmatics is the overlapping zone, as I told you. So, when we talked about the idea of invisible meaning while defining pragmatics, we did say that we are talking about meaning which we are taking from semantics again, but there is something more to it. Invisible meaning is related to context, and which also has a direct relation with certain societal norms. We did talk about the difference between pragmatics and semantics, and we said that pragmatics deals with meaning which is not a part of the semantic system. So, semantic system talks about certain meaning that we discussed previously, and pragmatics talks about the meaning component which is not a part of the semantic system. We did talk about the role of context, which is playing a major role for the meaning. So, meaning not only comes from the structure or compositional part of the compositional component of the structures, but it also comes from the context, and this is the point from where we can start thinking about the social norms which are coming in the scenario. So, this will be very important for us when we will be starting talking about sociolinguistics in this week. We will be seeing how the structural aspects are coming in our path in the studies of language and society, and that is why it is very important for us to understand the importance of pragmatics. So, we did talk about the role of context, and as I told you, we actually took certain examples and concepts which we discussed previously while talking about different structural aspects like deixis that we discussed in syntax and semantics both, reference that we discussed in semantics, inference that we partially discussed in semantics, entailment is a new concept that we learned today, and also help us to talk about meaning components. We also talked about entailment in the previous classes, and we talked about different types of speech acts, which is new for us. So, if you are interested in speech acts, if you want to pursue it, you can also go into the detail from the references. Finally, we talked about the idea of politeness phenomena, which is studied in pragmatics, and we also said that politeness phenomena create the base of the studies of pragmatics, where we can basically move to the study of sociolinguistics from the structural aspect. So, with the following topics, we are wrapping up the discussion of pragmatics. Now, if you think about the linguistic levels that we introduced in the very beginning part of the course, we did say that we will be talking about different structural levels, and we actually did that. We talked about phonetics, phonology, we talked about morphology, then we had a detailed discussion on semantics, some discussion on syntax, and also some discussions on pragmatics today. So, with this I will ask you to revise whatever we had done in all the structural levels of linguistics, because from the next lecture onwards we will be moving to a different component, and pragmatics is helping us to do so. So, please revise all these things, and do the tasks that we have asked you to do, not for evaluation but for yourself, for the tasks that we had listed for the lectures. And in the next class we will be moving to sociolinguistics, started talking about language and society. So, thank you very much for attending the lecture, and these are the key references. Thank you.